Yeah, yeah. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Which one is muted?
This one.
Oh, now it's fine, huh? Okay, it's 2, 3. So yeah, settle down. So let's settle down, friends. Hello and good afternoon. On behalf of Communitas, I welcome you all for this special lecture on how to write and publish paper. As we all know that writing and publishing papers are crucial for any serious researcher, but oftentimes we know that most researchers they face fundamental challenges on how to write well and get published in top renowned journals. So to address this issue, especially with our queries, questions, confusions, doubts, etc., regarding academic writing and publishing, we are very fortunate today to have our very own professor, Professor Suan, head of Department of Political Science, to talk on this subject matter. Professor Swan has consistently wrote and published papers, not only in top journals, but also in several periodicals, newspapers like the Hindu, the Indian Express, to name a few. And he has also received several awards related to his writing. Like recently, he was awarded joint winner of the 2023 Regional Studies Association Best Paper Award for his article Autonomy and the Territorial Management of Ethnic Conflict in Northeast India. Previously, he was also awarded T.N. Chaturvedi Award for Best Article in 2016 for his paper on multiculturalism and intercultural dialogue in Northeast region of India. Additionally, Sir was also an, a recipient of Fulbright scholarship for his postdoctoral studies at University of Pennsylvania, and the list goes on. But since time is short, friends, I'm sure all of us are very excited for this. And as we can see, it's a house full despite being post-lunch talk. So without further ado, I would like to invite Professor Swan to take over the session. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Joshua, and thank you, Communitas, for having me here. I'm rather hesitant to uh, deliver this talk, but I was prompted by some of our research scholars who happened to hear me out in one of my presentation in the Council for Social Development. And this is, in a sense, an improvisation of what I delivered in one of the sessions there. So what I intend to do today is to possibly navigate you uh, to some of the preliminaries of writing paper and how to go about publishing in journals which have national as well as international credentials, right? So I would also briefly go into the ethics of publication, which I think is important, and I'll end up with some concluding remarks. So one of the first thing that comes to our mind when we talk about how to write and publish papers is that where and why and how should we publish, right? So one of the things that bother us as student as well as young faculty or even mid-career faculty is that given now that there is an emphasis, a growing emphasis on academics, whether you are a research scholar or whether you are faculty at universities, to publish, because unless you publish, you do not have an impressive API score. You cannot be on the run for you know career upgradation. So or for that matter, for research scholar, unless you have some critical mass of publication in Scopus index journals or UGC care listed journals, or in some reputed publishing house, you may not be shortlisted for interview, right? So the imperative, therefore, is to publish, because until you publish, you will not be counted as a credible academic, right? So, in that sense, it is therefore imperative for you to publish somehow in UGC care listed journals, or in Scopus, or in Web of Science, or in some of these higher accredited rankings, rank journals like Journal Citation Report, for example. I'll come to this because it's often said in academic that unless you publish, you are likely to perish, right? You will not be accounted for in academics. So what should we be publishing, right? And how should we go about publishing paper, right? So one of the things that we have to bear in mind is that if you publish anything of any credence in academia, you have to go through this process, right? So you have to undertake some study through field experiment, or maybe through that can be of qualitative as well as quantitative nature, and somehow you'd get outcomes of that field work, field intervention, and you would start writing paper or article out of it, and you'd be looking out for journal where you possibly like to publish your outcomes, the outcome of the work that you garnered from the field that you chose to undertake your study, right? And once it is submitted to journal, you have a double-blind peer reviewed, which is usually done by the editorial committee of the journal concerned. And once they consider it as of qualitative in nature, which can be possibly considered for publication, then they send out to peer reviewers, right, or referees, as it were. It may be ranging from one to maybe around five, depending upon the reputation of the journal. So once you have credible reports or affirmative report from your prospective peer reviewers, then your article will be processed, copy editor would contact you, and it would be published. And that's the usual routine that we follow in standard publication. So therefore, what is important for us when we think about writing a paper or an article for publication in academic journal, because there are quite a variety of paper or article that we might consider writing. It can be of journalistic in nature, but we would essentially be concerned today with academic journal publication, right? So one of the first thing that I think is important for us to do is when we begin to write paper, we should also be thinking about the prospective journal that we intend to publish our work. So you should be looking out the journal specification. The journal specification would range from the styles of writing, the arguments that is being made in order of preference, whether you'd be flagging the arguments that you make in the article outright, I mean in the front page itself, or whether you should be first locating your research problematic within a large universe of external literature, as it were. So you should be able to locate the style specification of the journal that you intend to submit. So identifying a journal is very, very important in writing a paper, right? Because the if you look at the big issues of the journal that you intend to publish, you'll know the area of focus or the kind of article that they publish, and you'd also get to know, what are the styles, what are the quality, what are the kind of argumentation being made in a particular journal that you identify to publish your work. So it's therefore important that you should be well versed with the journal where you intend to publish, as well as the style specifications that you have. Having said this, it is therefore important that when we consider a journal, it is sometimes very easy for us to be complacent. In fact, one of the things, one of the refrains, that we often hear in Indian academia is getting published in international journals is too difficult, not only because of the rigor that goes into peer reviewing process, but also in terms of the time taken, right? Which necessarily need not be the case always. And I think that any journal of critical quality, of a standard which is acceptable both nationally as well as internationally, would possibly have a kind of a fixed set of peer reviewers who are more or less identifiable. Because if you write on caste, or if you write on identities, or if you write on politics of reservation, on issues of development, you would possibly know who would be your prospective reviewers, right? Because it's a small world. It's a kind of a clique, as it were, a kind of a caucus, as it were, right? It's a small clique, which a cartel, as it were, who would possibly be vetting your article, in the peer reviewing process. And therefore you need not be scared of that, in a sense. And in that sense, one of the ways of doing, therefore, is that if you are submitting an article on a particular domain of your expertise, you would possibly be having in mind a prospective reviewers, which is to say that you should be very carefully addressing to their works, right, in ways which is objective and which is fair, right? And therefore, it's therefore very important that you should not be missing any one of the expert who are known in your field, and which is to say that you should be able to select who which scholar to engage and which scholar not to engage very deeply, right? So I think using your personal discretion in doing that is also equally important, right? Having said it, therefore, I would therefore like to nudge you, to consider publishing in a fairly known journals, like fairly known journal, which have at least say Q3 and above. I will not go for Q4 at these days, but Q3 and above. If you look at CIMIGO list of journals, you have Q1, Q2, Q3 journals, and for a start, if you at least target Q3 and above, right? Preferably Q2 and Q1 is what people are looking out for. So you'll be looking at that. That's the Scopus bears, the ranking of journals according to the quality that they bring in, right? There is another level which you should also be looking at, what is called the JCR, Journal Citation Report, as it were. Earlier, it was known as the Thomson Reuters ISI Impact Factor Journals. You'll find that in the South Asian context, in social science or in humanities, you hardly have a bunch of journals which make into the journal citation index report, which include contribution to Indian sociology, Indian Journal of Gender Studies, Indian Social and Economic History Review, Indian Journal of Social Work. These are some of the few journals which could make into the JCR, as it were, or Journal Citation Index, the report which comes every year, right? So if at all you are aiming at becoming a serious academic of any consequence in your chosen field of expertise, you should be not only be aiming at these journals, right, but also higher journals. And I find that contribution to Indian sociology is wavering between Q2 and Q3 these days, right? Sometimes Q4 even. So contribution, as it were, is the highest impact factor journals from South Asian social science. So you should be looking at that, right? But you also have, say, in sociology, current sociology, or race and ethnicity, or much higher journals, right? So you'd also have a set of these journals which are indexed in Elsevier, in Project Muse, Science Direct, Scopus Index journals, Wiley Online, Cambridge University Press journals, Oxford journals, so and so forth, right? So long as you have article which can be published in one of these database, I think you'll be doing a decent job, right? You'll be having a good start for your academic career, right? So when you write article, or when you write a paper, therefore, it is imperative for all of you to be seriously engaging with the extant literature, as I said, right? So that is essentially right as good as writing your synopsis, right? Which is a précis version of your synopsis, in the sense that it should not end up with annotated bibliography, as it were, right? So you should be able to engage with extant literature in ways that makes your work distinctive, right? In the ways that your work should be speaking directly to the extant literature in ways that you'd be able to extend the insight that is already generated by the corpus of literature that is available out there in very innovative way. This could be done through maybe maybe through a very innovative methodology, or it can also be through a novel way of interpreting the empirical data that are available out there, maybe generated through your fieldwork, or maybe accumulated through your extensive readings of the materials at hand. So you should not be therefore repeating some of these well-known ideas or concepts ad nauseum when you write and engage that literature. That is to say that it should be precise, it should be spot on to the point in ways that enabled you locate your research questions or your research problematic within a large universe of the extant body of literature that are there in ways that make it appealing for your prospective reviewers to make a sense of affirmation that you have indeed something substantive, something novel, to say, both in terms of methodology or in the ways in which you bring in novel ideas of interpreting extant literature. So what is therefore imperative is that in doing so, once you locate your article within a large universe of existing corpus of literature, what therefore is imperative is that your argument should come out very softly, very pointedly in the first place itself. And people, the traditional way of writing is that we are so much engrossed into the existing literature that we get lost, and the arguments come up maybe 4 or 5 pages later, and by then, the enthusiasm and interest of the peer reviewer is gone, right? So therefore, it's important that you should be able to highlight spot on, at the very outset of your articulation, the key arguments that you make, right? What is also important then is that you should able to organize your argument in a very effective ordering, right? Logical coherence. There should be a logical coherence in the flow of your arguments as well as ideas, which should be captured very appropriately by the titles as well as the subtitle that you use. So it is therefore important that the titles or the subtitles through which you organize your ideas and arguments should be to the point, and it should in effect capture the essence of the ideas and arguments that you flag in the article or the paper. And therefore it is also important that sometimes we get lost in longest sentences. I have this tendency to write very longest sentences, and sometimes I have very critical comments from my reviewers for that, and we tend to thinking that verbosity sometimes is a replacement for brevity or concise ideas, right? But you can organize your ideas very concisely, very clearly, by writing crisp, short, effective sentences, right? And when you organize your article, you should also be mindful of the fact that very longest paragraphs are not often welcome, right? We tend to organize a kind of convoluted ideas, lot of ideas together and pack them into one paragraph, which sometimes, the message got lost in the complexity of the details that you bring in. So you should be able, therefore, to, balance. One is the quality requirement as well as the length of the paragraph, in the sense that each paragraph should be speaking to the next paragraph, and there should be logical coherence in the flow of your argument, right? And sometimes it's also useful that uh, you also come up with a kind of a conceptual map by way of tabulation, right? By coming out with a flow chart, as it were, of the flow of arguments that you present. If you are presenting a series of phases or categorization of the ideas that or arguments that you flag in the article. So so when you are done with this, when you finally prepare the article, which is ready for submission in journal, as I said, one of the ways that we intend to do in a hurry is that we want to get it published soonest, right? As soon as possible. And we often lost the patience to wait. But as I said, if you decide to publish in a journal which has a correspondence with the area of expertise that you bring to bear, right, in terms of your submission of the article, I think you have a very good chance of being considered. You can aim at a reasonably good Q1 or Q2 journal where the chances of your article being accepted is equally as high sometimes, because you know who would be your prospective reviewer, right? Even if you say submit more or less the same article in sociological bulletin, or the same reviewer would be reviewing the article that you submit in contribution to Indian sociology. And as a matter of choice, you would certainly go like to publish in contribution to Indian sociology, right? Or more or less, if it is related to India, even if you submit to higher ranked journal like ethnicities, ethnopolitics, or any one of these, right? Or on a larger platform like Modern Asian Studies, Journal of Asian Studies, chances are that your prospective reviewers would be more or less the same. And if you are lucky, you might get a very favorable, peer reviewer report on the article that you submit. Therefore, I think it's important not to be in haste, but to be patient, to be waiting, ready to wait for whatever outcomes you might get from the journal. And what is good about considering high impact factor journals or high good quality journal is the fact that irrespective of the outcome of your submission, chances are that even if it is in the negative, you'd get excellent referee comments, referee reports, which would help you improve the quality of your argument, or the ways in which you organize your ideas as well as arguments. The cons, the disadvantage of this being, again, is the fact that sometimes some of these top-notch journal have very high mortality rate, as it were, high, rejection rate, and therefore it is. But I think it is worth the risk, right? Why the what the time to wait, right? And therefore it is important that sometimes it is your attitude, as Zig Ziglar, this famous quote says, your attitude, not your aptitude, which will determine the altitude, the pace or the level of your academic attainment. So I think it's very, very important. Therefore, if you look at the list of journals that I present here, for example, in political science, American Political Science Review is considered to be, the journal where any ambitious political scientist would like to publish, which is not very easy, right? They have four peer reviewers there, and it is having four issues a year, right? Or ethnic and racial studies publishes 15 issues a year, right? Ethnicity is 6 issues. India Review more or less descend now that it has begun to have impact factor, almost one now, 5 issues a year. Journal of Peace Research, again, always in the top 10 in political science, publish 6 issues a year, right? So some of these journals, regional studies, for example, has 30 issues in a year, and impact factor of this journal is something like 4.5 something, right? Which is quite high. I mean, chances are that if you write a good, decent article in regional or territorial politics, if you could publish in regional studies, uh, it's considered to be the leading journal there, right? Something of sort. Or urban studies, if you work on development, urban studies, or development and change, for example, which would have urban studies has 16 issues a year, right? Development and change, if I'm not mistaken, around 4 or 5 issues a year. So that's important. So when you have something worthwhile, and I think it's important that you also know your weakness as well as your strength, because when you write an article, you know the quality of the article, right? You also know that you cannot submit sit a very low grade quality article to a top notch journal, because it is as good as being rejected, right? So I think you know best the quality that you bring into the academic table. And if you think that you have a chances of getting published in a decent, relatively higher ranked journal, please do not hesitate. Wait for it. And the advantage, as I said, it's always a win-win situation. If you publish in, if you submit in good, high-ranked journals, you will have excellent reports, irrespective of the outcomes. So what is important is that while doing this, one of the important things that we have to always bear in mind is issues of ethics. Like, and plagiarism is a major issues. You cannot simply improvise someone's idea and incorporate this in your article as if it is your own idea, right? And that does not essentially means that you need not cut and paste from somebody's words verbiage, verbatim, but you cannot improvise somebody's ideas or arguments as if it is your own and reproduce it in a very creative, clever, innovative ways, as if that is your original contribution, because you can get caught in what is called plagiarism, which is a very serious offense, right? And the penalty for this ranges, as we know, from 6 months to 3 years imprisonment, and sometimes entailing you a fine of 50,000 to 2 lakhs Indian rupees. So I think these are some of the things that you have to bear in mind. So, in conclusion, I think there are a set of things that we have to bear in mind. Writing article in credible journal takes time, right? And as you know, it is essentially the life of the mind that is at work. And please remember that academia is a longest profession, right? It's not a matter of one night or 1 week's wonder, right? It's consistently getting involved, fully immersed in the kind of work that you are engaged with. And therefore, it is very important that you should not only enjoy reading on a consistent basis, but you should also be willing to be disciplined, because writing involves a fair high level of discipline. And if you cannot be disciplined, chances are that you'd never be a good academic, right? Reading is so easy sometimes, right? But when it really comes to writing, it involves a lot of rigor, a lot of time, a lot of discipline in the process. So the life of the mind, therefore, is not a life in haste, a life that bring fruit instantaneously, but sometimes you have proclivity to be depressed, because sometimes after prolonged sittings, you might not get the desired results. And sometimes, as you know, as most of us know, after making effort for maybe 1 2 weeks, you do not write very plausible paragraphs, right? But suddenly some ideas strike you and you sit down and you just finish it in a matter of 2 or 3 days, right? So it happens with academic. So therefore, the life of academic, therefore, it's a kind of a high and low, right? It's and you should be willing to face that, to take this in your stride. So therefore, what you do is that every time you write an article, it's always a challenge. There, for every accomplished writer, if you ask them, they would say that every new assignment is a totally different assignment. It's not, there is no guarantee that just because you produce one good article, there is no guarantee that you produce another excellent article. It involves time, it involves creativity, it involves patience, it involves a lot of sacrifice in the making. And unless you have this on, and even chances are that you are not guaranteed of exactly the same award-winning article or not, because these are things which is also a matter of luck, right? You cannot always be lucky all the time. And I think sometimes awards or getting recognition matters, but I think this is not the only driving thing in life, right? We should be happy in the works. We should be enjoying in the work that we do, right? And that is the most important thing. And there is nothing which can substitute the fact that you take full enjoyment in the works that you are engaged with, right? So every small sacrifice that you make in times of the time spent, or in terms of the extra mile that you go in searching materials, in conducting field trips, or reaching out to more respondents in the field, would all the time be an incremental progress that you make, which would be an investment for your future. So in that sense, I think we should not be carried away by the fact that we should be making sweeping progress is us overnight, or fortnight, or maybe a month. It can take years and years of hard work, and so long as you are right into the table, right, in terms of asking the right research questions, grappling with the right set of research problematics, coming out with plausible explanatory variables, I think you are on a good wicket, right? And chances are that your hard work, consistent labor, in fact, and as well as investment into this would pay off. And finally, what would happen is that your paper that you write would be accepted, and it is always such a motivating news, and good news when we receive the fact that our article is published in a relatively decent journal, or having even published an article in an opinion piece is also quite rewarding in that sense. The kind of satisfaction that you get is all the time motivating, right? So in that sense, I think so long as you invest the right energy, the discipline, you dream it right, then you harness your research potentialities, the labor that you put in, or the time that you thought you wasted for all these years would come back one day, and you'd be able to harness what you dream and aspire for, right? With this, let me thank you once again, and I hope this helps you a bit in your career, right? Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I'm sure everyone, all of us, has really benefited out of this lecture. Now we'll have a Q&A session for about 15 minutes. So if you guys want to ask any question, please raise your hands, and yeah, we can start. Yeah, I think you can just speak there. Here's a question. Yeah, can you switch on one of the mics? Just not working. Oh, okay. I think that one is working. Okay, yeah, sure. Ask her. Yeah, the question is first.
Yeah. I think we take one question. Yeah. Yeah, one or two question more. Yeah. Or should I answer? Yeah. Yeah, please. Yeah. Mm. Mm. Yeah. Mm. Mm. Yeah. 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 I'll come to that. Yeah. The first question that you asked is pertinent. You see, choosing what to read and what not to read is very relevant in your case. Sometimes when you read books, not all the books are useful for for the article that you have in mind, right? You know the argument, right? Once you are clear about the argument in the paper that you are writing, you should be knowing precisely what type of correspondence or counterfactuals you are looking at, right? To the extent that the material that you read give you hint at the counterfactuals or the correspondence to the arguments that you make is useful, you should use your full discretion in reading how much, and how much less, right? So I think that would decide on the weight of the reading that you might like to take up, right? But I think for the start, it is always useful to read extensively as possible. I mean, for you as research scholars, because you cannot simply be reading one or two pages in a book and pretend as if you know the nuances of the arguments make, because you cannot capture the nuances of the argument unless you are able to look at this within the larger canvas of the complexity that the author or the authors bring to the analytical table. So to that extent, I think it's always useful to be able to capture the nuance. You cannot simply capture the nuance of the argument in one or two pages. It's not possible. On your question on involving a human, or there are the practice in US, they are very stringent, or in the UK they are very stringent about this, because if you are dealing with issues of say for example psychological or mental trauma, so and so forth, which involve human participation in the research project, you have to get institutional ethics committee clearance for that. So, like our university has an institutional ethics committee which give clearance, because there are a lot of ethic, ethical issues involved in it, because a lot of confidentiality involved, which you cannot simply divulge in public, outlets, right? So, I think one of the ways, therefore, to go about that is to approach the institutional ethics committee of the university concerned, which will give you clearance on that. Unless it is clear, the journal where you intend to publish would not give you a green signal. They will not go ahead unless you get clearance certificate from the university, in which you work. So that's very important. And I think that's a part of a larger ethical concern, which uh, at least in social science we are not yet very much bothered, but in US and other places they're very very stringent on this. Yeah. It's okay. You can speak from there. It should be audible if you put on one of the mic from that side. Just switch on the, yeah. Mhm. Yeah. I think in order to avoid that, I think that's a very pertinent question now that we have the Chat GPT now, right? and uh, and the possibility of crisscrossing one's idea and reposting as if it's your original idea, right? Uh, I think in order to grapple with this, I think we have to have intellectual honesty, right? Intellectual honesty is the key here, because you should be acknowledging to the extent possible the intellectual source of your citation to the extent possible. But if you unconsciously happen to borrow someone's without being conscious about that fact, I think so long as you have that intellectual honesty, to accept the fact that you are doing that in full honesty, right? In full conscience, I think, and you accept the fact if somebody raise it, right? And if you're not deliberately doing that, I think there are possibilities that you cannot be taken to a task very severely in that sense. So I think you should not be very much bothered about that, so long as you have the intellectual honesty to acknowledge and the citation, the sources that you cite in your work. Yeah, please. Mhm. Uh, No, frankly, I don't. I never use any one of this. So, and when we're engaging with specific research problematics, Grammarly and all are not very useful because you know they instead of resolving your problems, they complicate your problem, isn't it? So I think the best bet therefore is I know some of my friends who has very good original ideas about it. For example, he submit his article to Indian Economic and Social History Review, and the peer editorial board members as well as the referees like his article, but his article was found lacking in grammar and the sophisticated prose that they are looking at, because if you look at Indian economic social history articles, they are relatively quite you know uh, written in elegant prose, right? So they ensured that they hired a professional editor for him, and he has to pay something like 8,000 for that. And he also again submitted another one to MAS, Modern Asian Studies, which is again a very good journal, one of the Cambridge core journal. And they like it and they're willing to publish it, but they have to hire a professional editor for him, right? So to that extent, I think so long as you are able to convey, the ideas that you have in mind, I think do not be unduly bothered by the excellent prose or the lack of it that you are not able to bring to the analytical table. I think so long as you have consistency and coherence of the flow of ideas and argumentation that you make, chances are that your article might be accepted. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Mhm. I think it really depends on how, the as I said, one of the big consideration is the zonal specification in terms of what length, uh, because some of the journals like India Review, for example, which is one of my favorite journal because I tend to like very long articles, right? Earlier they used to accept article up to 15,000 words, which is quite comfortable for me to flag my ideas, across the table. uh, in that type of journal, you can extensively engage with the literature at hand, but you have to have a fair balance of how much of your work is engaged with existing literature and how much of original contribution you bring to the table, right? Unless that is fairly balanced and you have more of your contribution into play in the article, chances are that your article might not be accepted, right? So I think you have to be quite innovative in that sense. What is the other question that you asked? Okay, in that sense, you see, one of the common ways in which uh, you have something called uh, autoethnography these days, right? I do not know how. Dr. Sala has written an excellent article in Citizenship Studies. I would encourage you to have a look at that. That's one of the ways in which you can minimize the number of stories or individual respondent that you might engage. He come out with 4 or 5 uh, personal stories to capture the essence of the arguments or ideas that he presented. That's what we call autoethnography. So in that sense, the case selection should also be made very carefully, so that the case that you selected should be able to tell you, stories which have larger resonance on the research area that you are working with, right? It should not be something like you randomly pick up and you just start narrating it and just presented it as one compact journal article. No, it won't, because the kind of case selection should be able to uh, help you navigate diverse ideas or argumentation that are pertinent in the research field that you are working on. So to that extent, Salah's autoethnography, the article in his citizenship article is quite innovative, and I like it because 4 or 5 stories make a very compelling case on unraveling what he calls the precarity of citizenship debate in India. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I think one of the best way is to read the right material early on, because we tend to think that these foreign writers are difficult to understand. That's off-putting us, right? Most of the time we think that these people use a lot of jargon. Unless you deal with some of these materials on metaphysics or existentialism or some of these big theories, I think a good author would all the time be someone who is successful in conveying his or her ideas in a very neat, clear, concise manner, right? And the father of modern essays, A.C. Benson has this to say that a good essayist is someone who does not write something out of extraordinary, which you never thought of. He or she is someone who is a good writer or a good essayist, who in effect write on things that you have been thinking about, but you have not somehow put this down to words, right? Just because you know you can easily identify with it, has resonance. The ideas, the argumentation that he or she makes should resonate in you to make you think that, oh, I have been thinking about this a while for now, but I have not been able to translate this in writing. And that is considered to be the hallmark of a good essayist or a good author for that matter. So I think in that sense, reading good writers, good authorities on the domain that you chose, to do your research, would be the first step, the first baby step that we take. And you know what? When I did my postdoc, my mentor, Professor Brendan O'Leary, advised me that one of the ways that you can start is start selecting maybe at least 7 to 10 big authority in the area that you chose to work on. You should be well versed with the nuances of the arguments, and once you are well versed with the argument, you can come out with a set of good articles, or maybe with a book chapter, so and so forth, right? So I think therefore you should be able to select the authority who have made substantive contribution to the field of your research area. So I think that's a good start. So once you make it as a habit, to follow, to update yourself on the latest writing as well as the old writings that they have. We tend to ignore the fact that some of these old works are obsolete. They are not relevant now. No, in academia, the more you are grounded, the more effective you are as a scholar, because you can have a bird's eye view of the research problematic that you are grappling with. So to that extent, I think you make it a matter of everyday habit to engage not only on a very narrow limited temporal focus, but on having a more longitudinal view, a kind of a long durée view of the research area that you are grappling with, so that you have a fairly good bird's eye view of the research ideas problematics that you are grappling with. Yeah, yeah. Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Mhm. Mhm. Again, you see, arguments are our subjective interpretation of existing material, right? To that extent, there is an element of opinion all the time out there. But to the extent that you are able to substantiate your subjective view or what you call opinion with credible empirical data is the touchstone of a rigorous academic writer, as it were, right? So to that extent, even I think if you stretch this in the popular writing, even in newspaper, I think a good op-ed author like Pratap Banu Mehta, you look at one of the best and most popular we have, or Professor Suhas Palsika. You have a look at their writing. You may consider that these are just opinion pieces. No, they are not. In fact, they are well grounded in the academic literature that they are writing on. So to that extent, opinion are not just created in a vacuum. They are backed by empirical evidence or empirical data, and unless you have that ability to correspond your opinion with existing material, your subjective opinion does not have any analytical traction whatsoever. So to that extent, I think it is very important to always have a balancing act in empirical details with the subjective view that you bring to the analytical table. Yeah. Is it all right?
Thanks once again, sir. Now I'd like to call Vishnu Priya to say a vote of thanks since we are running out of time. So please.
Uh, good afternoon, everyone. I would like to take a moment to thank everyone who has come here and shown interest in this program on behalf of Communitas and all students of the Political Science Department. I would like to congratulate Dr. Suan on his getting the award, and it's a very proud moment for us to get guided under you. uh, and this lecture would help a lot of students who have interest in research and writing articles but doesn't know where to start and how to start. And for scholars, it has expanded their view of research journalists and the scope of work they can do. And in the age of chat gpt and ai, this is a very good imperative to have a original work. And I would like to thank all the professors, Dr. Bhim Subba, Dr. Sneha Banerjee, and Anaga Engol, and all the people who have come here and made this program a success. Joshua, Prithvi, and Michael, Vipin, Rakshit, and Emlyn. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Have a good day.
Yeah. Chai is waiting for everyone. Yeah. Chai and samosa. Thank you, Vipin. Thank you.
So that we'll share it.